into where the anger came into his life, and God had to deal with Moses. But the first one we're going to go through is Numbers chapter 20, and we're going to go through the first 13 verses. I am actually reading from the New International Version. I forgot what version those are that are in the pew, but just follow along. In the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at Desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. There, Miriam died and was buried. Now, there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had died when our brother fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here?" Kind of like a group of people you want to hang out with, don't you? "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or fig, grapevine or pomegranate, and there is no water to drink." Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink." So Moses took the staff from the Lord present, just as he commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebel! Must we bring you water out of this rock?" Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." These were the waters of Meribah, where the Israelites quarreled with the Lord, and where he was proved holy among them. We have to kind of take a little background into the situation of what Moses was going through at this very time, and why God reacted the way that God did. This is coming toward the end of the Israelite first travel, probably within the last year. So Moses at this time is roughly around 118, probably 119 years old. So that's slightly old, but back then that wasn't really old. That was more, well, it was old, but it was a long lifespan way back when. But, his old age was kind of affecting him. The other thing, too, was that his sister had just died, and he was probably still in a grieving state of mind. And then, of course, comes something that he had had a problem with for almost 40 years. The complaining, the quarreling, the ongoing, non-stop, "Moses, why did you do this?" This is even after all these people, most of them anyway, because these are the younger kids, some who probably were born on the trail to going to the new land, because most of the older people who were on this had already died and passed off. So some of these kids probably didn't get to see the 10 plagues, but some of them do remember their grandparents, their great-grandparents, telling them about what happened when they left Egypt. So they know of God's miracle and what God can do and what God takes care of them no matter what. And they have even seen miracle after miracle on their way. There was the crossing of the Red Sea some 40 years ago. And this story has gone passed down and down and down and down. So these people were not without knowledge of who God was and what God could do. So the anger was building up in them. This situation happened once before, not this particular one, but shortly after they had left Egypt, there was a situation where they came to the very same body of water. And we find this story in Exodus chapter 17. This is a different situation. They had just gotten out of Egypt. They had just crossed through the Red Sea. They are coming to a dry part of the land. And they are without water. Not only for themselves, but for all the livestock, because they left with a lot of livestock, a lot of cows, a lot of oxen, a lot of sheep, a lot of rams. All these animals that they had, that they were trying to get through, that needed water. And in 17, starting with the first verse, we read this. And I'm starting Exodus 17, starting with the first verse, we start to read this. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rapha, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses, see if this sounds familiar, and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and our livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock. Strike the rock, and water will come out for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders, and he called the place Cursah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Okay, so we got two situations. But what was the difference between what happened in Numbers and what happened in Exodus? Well, in Exodus, Moses, first, of course, he went to prayer. He was given direction of what to do, and he went and did it, and he obeyed. And he took that staff in front of witnesses, and he struck the rock, and water came out. So what's the difference between this and what happened in Numbers? Well, the first thing that happened was, of course, Moses went and he prayed. That was something that he was supposed to do. God, again, gives him direction of what to do. This time, he wasn't supposed to strike the rock. He was supposed to talk to the rock. Now, to some of us, talking to a rock probably is the same equivalent as me talking to this wall. I'll probably get to pretty much the same result that you would get, where nothing would happen. But God very specifically told Moses to strike this rock because he was going to use this situation as another situation to show the miracle. But instead of striking the rock, instead of talking to the rock, Moses, starting in verse 9, took the staff from the Lord present, just as he commanded. He started out okay. We're starting fine. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock, and Moses said, let's stop there. How often do you pray to God, God, help me get this situation taken care of? And the next thing you do is what you want to do. Or what you react with. Moses reacts. By, first of all, responding to the people. He chews them out. Look at it in verse 9. Listen, you rebel, must we bring you water out of the rock? The first mistake Moses did was compare himself and put himself on the level of God. In his anger, do you want me? Must I bring you water out of this rock? Do we bring you water out of this rock? There was no mention of God there. So he's telling these people, you think I can do it? In his anger, he forgot who he was serving. We do that. When we are angry, we can forget who we are serving. And in that response, we react. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Then comes the next part. And Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out in the community, and their livestock drank. What was the difference? In Exodus 17, we saw that Moses obeyed. But in Numbers, in almost the same situation, almost 40 years, 39 years later, the same situation, even after Moses prayed, even after Moses talked to God about what to do, in his anger, in that 5-second split, in that non-controllable urge, he disobeyed. It took him away from the one that he was following then. And it's more into this, but you know that anger is actually the very first emotion that God had us to deal with. The very first entity that God had to deal with after the fall of mankind. If we go over to the book of Genesis, I hope some of you know how to find the book of Genesis. It's like closer to the bookend of the front. First book. And we're going to read chapter 4. Verses 3 to 6. Now Abel kept flock, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruit of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portion from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked down with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. And look at what the Lord said to him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." I gotta tell you, being angry itself is not a sin. It is what you do with that anger that could cause the sinful act. Because God told Cain, "Hey, calm down. Cool it, dude. You let that emotion get to you, it's going to control you. It's going to have you." James says, "For sin comes when we are enticed by our own evil desire. Once that is conceived, it gives birth to sin." We all know what Cain did next. In his anger, he killed his brother. He couldn't just, let it go. It's cool. Take a minute. Take a few. He allowed that anger to build up. And he thought he solved the problem. Moses himself have always had a problem with anger. Always. Right from the beginning of his ministry. In Exodus chapter 32, I believe it. Hang on. I've lost my place. Hold on a minute. I know what I'm looking for, but we know the story. Moses was out in the field with his people. He's looking around, and then he sees this Egyptian soldier who was abusing one of his fellow Hebrews. And Moses took a look this way, and he took a look that way, and when he saw that he thought that nobody was looking at him, what'd he do? He went and he killed that Egyptian soldier out of his anger for that. So Moses has had an anger problem since the beginning. But what was wrong with this particular problem that at this time that we read about in Numbers chapter 20? Well, first of all, like we said, Moses put himself onto the level of God. Must we bring you water from this rock? Moses spoke, as if he and God were one, and God couldn't do the job without Moses. How many of you are God? How many of you heard people say, well, if I was God, I would, right? Praise the Lord you are not God, because I'm sure the world would still not be here. But we think we can tell God what we can do. And sometimes we do that in our own anger. How many of you have ever said this? Oh my God, why did you? You heard that? So a lot of that time, sometimes that's said in anger. We're looking at God and we're saying that because he's not doing it our way, we just do what we want, or we think, oh, there gotta be another way. I'm gonna do this myself. The other thing too is Moses struck the rock not just one time, but twice. This was a totally different reaction to what God had told him to do and to what happened in Exodus chapter 17. What's the problem? Why did God have a problem? In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul kind of explained what went on here in the first 4 verses, where he talked about the history of the Israel and using this instant, this very particular instant, to teach the people of Corinth what went on, and he's using the Jewish people, the man that they look to the most. They're looking at what Moses did. And we're going to read on 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and we're going to read through the first 4 verses. For I do not want you to be ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud, and that they all passed through the sea. They all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And he's talking about the Red Sea there. They all ate the same spiritual food and drank from the same spiritual drink. For they drank from that spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock was Christ. What the idea that Paul was bringing about was that the rock was a form of the soon-to-come Christ that these Hebrew people back then at that time did not know about, but it was a form of what the future would be, which is Christ. For this rock represented the coming Christ. And the first time that Moses had to deal with the rock to bring out water, Moses hit the rock. It was a sign of the future of human being hitting the Christ, the rock. And then the second time when God said to talk to the rock, it was a sign of using prayer, using communication to talk to God, to allow for God to be the provision of the water. And yet, the first time that he hit, yes, water came out, just like water came out of Jesus when he died. And the second time, yes, water came out. Because God still provided, in spite of the disobedience that was in there. But there was a problem with the anger, because the anger that we have when the anger that we have separate us from what God wants us to do, instead of dealing with the anger in the way that Christ wants us to deal with it, instead of allowing our lives to be totally controlled and obedient to God. This particular problem led to a downfall for Moses. We pick it up in verse 12 of Numbers, because it gets crazy here. Look at it. Chapter 20, verse 12. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them. This anger cost Moses something that he'd been trying to do for so many years. It cost him the opportunity to reach the physical, earthly, promised land that God was going to give to the Israelite people. Why did it cost him? Look at what he said. Because you did not trust me enough. In our anger, in his anger, he lost for a second, for that split second. He lost a virtue of knowing that God could take care of it. And not only that, but right in front of all those people, God said, you didn't trust me, and you did not allow me to be the Holy One. Going back to what Moses did, must we? In this circumstance, it should have been, all right, let me show you what God's going to do. Hey, Rock, come here. Let's have a talk. Show these people what you can do. I need a cup. Would have been a whole different story. But because of this, he tells Moses, I'm sorry, dude. That's not to say that Moses didn't get into the promised land, because we are all going to go into that promised land if we know Christ. But anger cost Moses something. It cost him his final goal. which was probably a devastating loss for him, because he just spent all this time trying to get these people to where they were supposed to go. By the way, they were only, for the entire trip, for the entire 40 years, they were only 2 weeks out from Egypt to the Promised Land, if they would have obeyed God in the beginning. But that's another whole different story. But the thing is, they were actually in the area for the entire time. And their disobedience cost them their ancestors, because their ancestors showed disobedience by questioning, quarreling, and getting angry. Because that was the main thing. They were angry, but they didn't take their anger out on God. They took their anger out on Moses. And because they took their anger out on Moses, and they told God, what about? It's a whole different story. But here's the thing. It only took a split second. It only took 5 seconds. It was basically from the prayer straight to the rock. And within that time, Moses was probably going, got the people keep on grumbling and grumbling, grumbling, grumbling. And when he got to the rock, you people! Must we bring this war? I'm just doing the way I think Moses was doing it, except he had a bigger beard and he's like, argh! But in that split second, Moses lost, I wouldn't say a promising future, because obviously he was close to the time, but he lost what he was aiming for. And how often, I think of driving. Now, generally I'm a calm person. I don't get over exaggerated, as you could see. But sometimes when we're driving, well, not Sammy. Sammy, you're the only one left of your family. I guess but but sometimes when we're driving, somebody cuts us off. Somebody, maybe my biggest pet peeve. Joni will tell you this. My biggest pet peeve when we're driving is when jaywalkers just walk right in front of you. I mean, literally right there. And you're like, ugh. And in that split second, we have that anger. But in that split second, what can actually happen if we're not paying attention because of the anger? Maybe we get into a little crash. Doesn't happen all the time, but we do lose that temper. And like I said, anger is not the big sin issue. Anger itself. Jesus himself got angry. Probably the most famous case, he got mad with the Pharisee, a couple of Pharisees, and kind of started taxes on them. But probably the most famous case that we know of is when Jesus came to the temple, and there were some merchandise selling this and selling that, actually selling sacrificial animals on the temple step. And what did he do? He overturned the table. He changed the situation. But why would that anger not sinful? Why would that action not sinful? Because it was in the righteousness of doing what God wanted him to do to get those people out of the house of God, because the purpose of the house of God was for prayer and to come together. And Jesus had that taken care of. When Moses did the striking of the rock, and that second time, that was not the purpose that God had for that rock. In Deuteronomy chapter 34, we read about Moses' death. Moses climbed I'm starting with the first verse. And Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plain of Moab to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. There the Lord showed him the whole land from Gilead to Dan. So God was not being totally unjust or mean or anything with Moses. Moses did get to see the promised land. Didn't get into it, but he did get to see it. And that probably was enough for Moses. All the Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah, as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho, the city of Palm as far as Zor. Boy, he had a really clear view on the mountain that day. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised as an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eye, but you will not cross over to it." I tend to think that part of the reason why God didn't, along with what happened over at Meribah, I think that part of the reason why God didn't let him in, because Moses would have really, really suffered with the shameful act that the Israelites did into the promised land. You know why? Because they brought in themselves as they were. They didn't bring themselves in as God was trying to change them, as God, miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, have told them. They too, along with the idolatry, but they also brought in their grumbling and their very being that God wasn't taking care of it. And a lot of that was done out of anger. Anger does cost. It cost Moses the promised land, to walk in, the opportunity to walk into that promised land. If you ever got angry, can you consider what it had cost you? Now, I know you're young. Trust me, there'll be more things to get angry about. But you need to learn now, how to control that anger. You know why? Because if you don't, you're going to do something that you shouldn't do with that anger. Romans 8:28 has the famous verse that a lot of us know. Sometimes it's misused. Okay, I'm sorry. A lot of times it is misused. But I think for this sermon, it's probably a particularly good one. We know that all things work together for the good who love God and according to his purpose. You know, we got a lot of crazy stuff going on with the COVID and with the resident in White House and with even our own personal situations. But guess what? And Joni reminds me this all the time. Who's in control? What did the Bible say? Yes. Yes. Who's in control? Do you allow your anger to get... Or do you say to God, okay, Lord, what am I doing today? How do I deal with this? Let's pray.